If you're new to my channel, between new releases I've been playing older games. Now you might have already seen me play a heap of Star Wars games and maybe even my Gears of War series, but before all of that I was replaying and reviewing all the entries in the Arkham verse to prepare myself for Gotham Knights. Now it's been a hot minute since I last did my Road to Gotham Knights video series, and after finding where I left my copy of Arkham Origins, it's time to take a look at the only DLC I never played, Cold Heart, and boy was I disappointed. Batman Arkham Origins Cold Heart DLC, from here which will be referred to as Cold Heart, takes place on New Year's Eve, where Arkham Origins took place on Christmas Eve, so basically a couple of days later. Anyways, Bruce Wayne is hosting the Gotham's Humanitarian Awards ceremony at Wayne Manor, with the recipient being Ferris Boyle. Now if you know Ferris Boyle, you already know where this is going. Mr. Freeze makes a fantastic entrance, grabs Ferris Boyle, and begins burning down Wayne Manor alongside the Penguin's goons. Now you'll start off as Bruce Wayne inside your mansion, which is fucking huge just in the rooms itself. With the wine cellar, I'd fucking drown down there. Anyways, the start of the DLC is a bit like when the Joker arrives at Harvey Dent's party in The Dark Knight. Bruce Wayne will take out some goons, disappear into a room, go down into the Batcave, and change into Batman. Now as the DLC is set after the events of the main game, some of the Batcave is closed off and destroyed from when Bane was down there. Anyways, you'll suit up and you'll get a tease for a future suit that you'll wear, and we'll get into that a little bit later. You'll do what you're expected to do and chase after Mr. Freeze and Ferris Boyle inside Wayne Manor before going up against the only new enemy variant in the DLC, heavy units equipped with the cryo cannons on their back, making them little portable versions of Mr. Freeze. Now while they're an interesting variant, and I'll get to them a little later, as you'd expect, Mr. Freeze and Ferris escape and you'll need to go after them in Gotham City. Now there's no real way around this, but Gotham City in this DLC is smaller than the dick you were conceived with. Now yes, that might be harsh to your dad, but dude, look at the map. There are only 2 suburbs or boroughs available here. Yes, Firefly destroyed the bridge somewhat in Arkham Origins, but you're Batman with a fucking bat plane that can fly around the map. Surely by spreading and opening up the map more, it would stretch out the DLC, yeah? Anyways, you'll do some repetitive detective work that you've already done if you played the main story. You'll find a freezer geezer, take on some hired goons, and then follow a frost trail while it's snowing. Okay? Anyways, from here you go to Gothcorp, the company that Ferris Boyle owns, where Mr. Freeze and the Penguin have taken Ferris Boyle hostage, going through Gothcorp. As you'd expect, you'll need to rescue Ferris Boyle, stop the Penguin and Mr. Freeze, and when you catch up to Penguin, he has double-crossed Mr. Freeze. Now Mr. Freeze wants Ferris Boyle to unlock something, and the Penguin thinks he should get a cut of it, whatever it is, and obviously it's Nora. The gameplay and the combat is exactly the same as Arkham Origins with no new gadgets. Well, no real new gadgets. You can thermocharge batarangs to melt ice, and it's more of the same, and it really adds nothing new. If there is a frozen vantage point or frozen terminals, you'll be able to charge up the batarang and throw it at those items to melt the ice away so you can use them. Now this is where the DLC starts to drop. Batman arrives, distracts the Penguin and his goons, and Mr. Freeze creates a giant ice wall blocking himself and Ferris off from Batman and the Penguin, with the Penguin getting caught inside the ice wall, and the only thing that can break the ice wall is a fetch quest. Now baby, it's cold outside and Batman will need to summon his thermal cold suit, which was teased at the start of the game when you go into the Batcave to change into Batman. You'll then also need to find 2 parts for a special drill, which the Penguin has stole and separated throughout the 2 boroughs of Gotham City. Now, okay, I need to break down how stupid these parts are. Now let's start first with the new cold suit. Now while it does look cool and it sort of makes sense to wear a thermal suit to go up against Mr. Freeze, there are a couple of plot holes. Now when you first see the suit, you'll hear that the suit isn't ready for deployment because Alfred needs to work on it. 15 to 20 minutes later, Alfred deploys the suit. Now Alfred says he can't deploy the suit because there's goons around and they could steal or damage it, which look, I guess it makes sense. Now you'll need to take out the goons running around on the street for the suit to arrive on the fucking rooftops. And to open the pod when the suit arrives, Bruce Wayne will need to scan his handprint. So why do we need to clear the streets when it arrives on the fucking roof? Also, it scans his handprint when he's wearing gloves. Bit strange. Secondly, look at the suit. Yes, it looks kinda cool and it's bulky as fuck. When you equip the suit, you'll lose the ability to have these shock gauntlets because they're replaced with thermal gauntlets that do the same thing. Now when you activate these or use any heat-based abilities, the suit will glow, which is cool, and you'll move around exactly the same as you normally would in the standard Batsuit because of the honeycomb center or something.
Should help you deal with most ice you encounter, sir, and the suit will provide protection from cold and cryovapor. I just hope its bulk won't slow you down.
The honeycomb structure insulates against extreme cold without increasing weight. It won't slow me down a bit.
Fuck off. You are wearing a suit of armor that is as thick as horse cum. You won't be as mobile as you normally would be. It would have been if there was a cool mechanic that while wearing the suit you would have more health, but you wouldn't be able to run or slide or maybe even glide. It's a huge, bulky suit. It could have been a really cool system in place where you could open up the suit, sort of like an Iron Man armor, for normal Batman to jump out of it and move around and do tasks that armored suits couldn't do. Fuck, Batman gets inside vents inside this suit, and this is all I could think of the entire time while playing the DLC. Now secondly, you'll need to find 2 parts for an experimental drill that will create a giant hole inside the wall of ice that Mr. Freeze has created. Now you only need to get these 2 parts, and once you've got them, you'll basically need to get a sample of Mr. Freeze's cannon for some god unknown reason, because you don't really use it unless it's in the cutscene at the end. But anyways, you'll then backtrack through Gothcorp, which is now full of the Penguin's goons wanting to rescue their boss. Besides going through Gothcorp again, Batman is in his cold thermal suit, which can break smaller ice walls and rescue frozen cops and scientists and stuff. Now rather than making a fucking special drill, why doesn't Batman just use his heat suit to melt a hole in the wall? It makes no fucking sense. Now in this DLC you'll go up against heavy units with Mr. Freeze's cryo cannons or a alternate version of them. They'll need to be stunned and beaten up like you're taking on armored enemies. However, the game doesn't tell you any of this. Through the core campaign of Arkham Origins, the game slowly introduces you to new enemy variants and teaches you how to beat them up and get around them. While there is only one new enemy variant here, this DLC gives you no help, no heads up, and nothing on how to get around them, and the first time I went up against these cryo suit guys, I died, and I got fucking angry. Finally, after you get the drill parts, you'll blow a hole open in Mr. Freeze's ice wall and you'll go after him and face off against him. Now in Arkham City, the Mr. Freeze fight was full of tension, because you couldn't do the same technique twice. Here though, it's boring, it's unexplained, it's unoriginal, and honestly I nearly gave up on finishing the DLC because of this fight. The first section of the boss fight is a simple Predator challenge mode style. Freeze will be high up on a platform protecting 3 cooling units that he'll keep an eye over. You'll need to avoid Freeze and sneak to the cooling units and use Batman's thermal suit to heat up these units, all while taking out and avoiding 5 armed goons searching for you. Now if Mr. Freeze sees you, he'll call out to the guards in the area where you are and he'll actually try to freeze you. After you've done all 3 cooling units, Mr. Freeze basically freezes the entire room and he'll roam around the map like he did in the Arkham City fight. Now you won't be able to stun Mr. Freeze with your cape and wail on him. You'll be able to drop hanging ice onto him and nearby goons that also roam around the map. You'll also need to wait for Freeze to walk past frozen walls and perform a takedown on him from there, which again, the game doesn't tell you to do this. I spent over an hour trying to drop stalactites on Freeze and getting caught by goons for over an hour before getting frustrated and googling, how the fuck do I do this boss fight? Also, there's guards walking around the room hunting you alongside Mr. Freeze when Freeze completely froze the room over. He even says he'll freeze the air in your lungs, and there's normal goons walking around in snow jackets.
Let's see how well you do when the air freezes in your lungs.
Fuck off. The only cool thing is that if Mr. Freeze is venting frost from his suit and he walks past a guard, he'll freeze them. That's the only cool thing about this boss fight. After this, there's a cutscene where Ferris Boyle tries to take out Mr. Freeze and Batman. Batman saves Mr. Freeze and the credits immediately roll. This cutscene wraps up 3 hours of DLC and then it's just credits with narration. This DLC was a giant letdown. Once you finish the DLC, you can roam around the small section of Gotham doing side missions like rescuing frozen cops or taking out gangs, but honestly, once I finished the core DLC campaign, I fucking uninstalled it straight away. Mr. Freeze is my favourite Batman villain and there was loads of potential for him. This DLC starts so strong, basically copying the iconic Heart of Ice episode from Batman the Animated Series, and surprise surprise, it's also my favourite episode. That episode reinvented the character of Mr. Freeze, and starting the DLC off with Freeze arriving and freezing people at the Humanitarian Awards was fantastic. Then seeing Gotham closed off and shortened for no real reason was a giant slap in the face. Then doing a fetch quest to get drill parts, which Batman puts behind his back? Really? The drill parts are fucking huge. It would have been cool if they were hanging from his belt or something. Anyways, you'll have a great intro and you'll follow Mr. Freeze and Penguin. Then you'll do a fucking fetch quest and return to take out Mr. Freeze in a unoriginal, poorly explained, infuriating boss fight, all to have it end in a fucking cutscene and credit roll! Okay, I'm fine. The only good thing about this DLC is being able to go into Gothcorp and using your detective mode to trace back and follow clues of how Victor Freeze became Mr. Freeze. And this only really works if you're a Mr. Freeze fan. If you don't like the character or you couldn't really care about him, then this DLC isn't really for anyone. Yes, it extends the life of Arkham Origins, but in my opinion it's just not worth it. You'll finish Arkham Origins with a pretty good ending, and then you'll have this DLC that just leaves a sour taste in your mouth. If Arkham Origins was a passable or alright pizza, then Cold Heart is a frozen garlic bread. Next up on the list is Arkham Knight, the somewhat controversial final entry in the Rocksteady Arkham games that is still to this day a pretty as fuck game. I'm sorry, I was just so disappointed in this DLC. The best Batman villain, well at least in my opinion, and he looks like a walking snow globe. Did you ever play Cold Heart though? Who's your favourite Batman villain, or have you ever been disappointed with a DLC? I'll be back next week taking a look at the Hawkeye DLC for Avengers and the interesting changes made to Rainbow Six Siege. Now if you did enjoy this video, or this giant rant really, feel free to check out some of my other videos or subscribing to the channel.